ready.
All right, here they come.
All right. Well, good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another MU Extension Garden Hour. Always happy to have you with us. Hope that you all have got to enjoy some of the beautiful weather we've been having over the past couple days, kind of chilly mornings turning into some beautiful sunshine. So hope you're getting out there and getting to enjoy, these last couple weeks of the gardening season before we drop into some freeze and frost events and some colder temperatures to come. And so just in case you haven't seen this map before, we do have MU horticulturists all across the state of Missouri. We're always happy to answer your questions related to any kind of plant related questions. And we are spread all across the state there. So go ahead, if you need to take a moment, you can jot down the email address for the person that covers your county. And if it looks like your county is an open position, feel free to reach out to any of us in any of the neighboring counties, and we're always happy to help you get your question answered. So I would like to go ahead and hand it over to our state climatologist, Mr. Pat Guinan, to give us the weather report.
Sounds good. And thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. We had a very chilly morning this morning, and some of the lowest temperatures we've seen in some areas since the spring. These on the left are the low temperatures. Parts of north central, northeast Missouri, they dip down into the 30s, even some middle 30s. I see right up here around Kirksville over to Trenton here in Grundy County. That's the lowest temperature I could find using National Weather Service cooperative weather stations and our Missouri Mesonet weather stations. 35 degrees located at the north central Missouri Barton Farm here, right here in Grundy County. I did see some reports indicated some scattered areas of frost, nothing too widespread, but it really is an indicator that the freezing temperatures are just around the corner as we enter the month of October. So a chilly morning on the right. They've rebounded quite well. This is as of about 10 minutes ago, showing current temperatures, looking at Missouri Mesonet data. They've really warmed up here in Southwest Missouri. We got 73 degrees at Lamar. Still a little bit cool, but nonetheless, they've rebounded about 20 degrees or so here in Northeast Missouri with temperatures in the mid 50s. Abundant sunshine. It's just another beautiful day. Low humidity, and generally highs today reaching into the upper 60s to lower 70s, especially here across southern parts of the state. I think the big concern is the lack of rainfall we've had. It's been a dry September for the most part. On the left, these are radar estimates showing rainfall across the state from the 1st of September through this morning. And I don't see any rainfall over the next couple of days. So it's safe to say this is going to be a monthly estimate or monthly total of what we've seen. Look how dry it is across western, southwestern parts of the state. Southeast Missouri, it's been very dry. These blues and lighter greens are generally less than an inch, even some areas less than a half inch for the month of September. So that's very dry and not a good situation overall, especially across the southwestern parts of the state, some west central sections where it's been not only a dry September, but it's been a dry summer. We've had drought impacting much of that area. And that drought situation has expanded across a much larger portion of Missouri. And you'll see that tomorrow when the new drought monitor map comes out. On the right shows departure from normal for the month of September. We're running 3 to 4 inches below average just for the month of September. And those deficits are much larger as we look through the rest of the summer. So some very dry conditions. And unfortunately, even though it's very nice out, we need the rain. A lot of watering still occurring for lawns and gardens and whatnot because it's been so dry. And these are this table here at the bottom shows some of the totals. Look how dry it is in Southeast Missouri. Clearwater Dam, just a little over 1/4 of an inch for the month. About 1/3 of an inch over in Poplar Bluff. Nevada in Southwest Missouri, 3,800ths. Joplin, 4,100ths. Very dry conditions, and obviously we're seeing some significant drought impacts not only on crops and vegetation, but we're starting to see some hydrological issues with reports of wells going dry in southwestern Missouri. It does look like some very nice temperatures over the next few days, very fall-like, very pleasant, low humidities. Here on the left are the high temperatures for today, generally reaching into the 60s across northern, northeast Missouri, lower to middle 70s across southern parts of the state. Low, very chilly mornings, lows in the 40s on Thursday morning and Friday morning and on into the weekend. Highs on Thursday in the 70s, most of the state, as well as on Friday, highs in the 70s. It doesn't really get much better than that in regard to the abundant sunshine, low humidities, highs in the 70s, and low morning lows in the 40s. And that's going to continue on into Saturday and Sunday. This is a forecast of rainfall over the next 7 days. This dry period is continuing on into the first week of October. Little to no precipitation, generally nothing over the next 7 days is forecast from North Dakota to Texas and on east into much of the Midwest. You can see just nothing at all. Of course, what you see here on the right, all that significant rainfall is complements of Hurricane Ian, which is about to make landfall near Fort Myers, Florida, and just north of there. Some big rainfall totals, upwards of 15 inches perhaps across Florida. Obviously, some very serious conditions ongoing there. That rainfall will translate north and northward into much of the mid-Atlantic states. It'll be much more of a heavy rain event versus a storm surge and wind event that they're seeing right now in Florida. Nonetheless, that's where pretty much the heavy precip is confined over the next 7 days, maybe a little bit more activity across the northern Rockies from Montana to Colorado, but right here in the middle part of the country, very dry. These are the temperatures for next week. That'll take us through the first week of October. Generally, the western 2/3 of the country, it looks like an enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures. That includes all of Missouri. We're going to see some gradual warming as we get into Sunday and early next week, perhaps getting into the upper 70s over portions of Missouri. It looks like that'll persist through much of next week. Unfortunately, the dry conditions are going to continue. There is an enhanced likelihood of below normal precipitation for next week. So enjoy the nice conditions, at least through the weekend. And it looks like for much of next week, unfortunately, not a lot of rainfall in the forecast. Justin, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Pat. We always appreciate having you on, sir, and really enjoy your weather forecast there. So we had some questions come in last week about some issues with walnut trees shedding branches. And so I think Tamara is going to go ahead and take that one off.
I am. Thank you. Hold on just a second and I'll bring up my slides. Okay, you should be able to see it now.
Looks good.
Awesome. Okay. So this right here, this picture here is a walnut. It's a black walnut in someone's yard, and you can see that there is a large limb on the ground. And the question that came in is, my tree looks healthy, but it just dropped this huge branch. What's going on? So did a little bit of investigating. This was actually over email and phone call and text. But anyway, so we took a look at the crown to see what was going on, if we could see anything from there. And the crown actually looks pretty healthy from this initial picture. But he did take some closer up pictures and did notice that there were some other branches in there that were broken. So it wasn't just the one that had fallen. It looks like there were other issues other branches that could cause further issues. So falling limbs, definitely a sign that the tree is under some sort of stress. It's dangerous. Obviously, there are risks involved. There are small kids in this household. And if you have any landscape in there as well, there's reasons why you wouldn't want anything falling down. So it's good that we're figuring this out. Here's another image. So you can see the trees over here, this large limb, and other things going on in the landscape. We're still trying to figure out what's going on. One thing to point out is that the limbs did have a lot of leaves on it. And when it initially fell, those leaves looked pretty healthy. So it wasn't as if this was just a dead branch that was up there that just fell. So I asked of you for a picture of the break point. It's really hard to see in a picture, but I wanted to see was it hollow? Could I see obvious signs of decay? But it didn't look like it. It looked like it was still pretty healthy. But so then next I wanted to know, what does the base of the tree look like? Sometimes trees get hit by mowers or weed whackers. Sometimes I see mulch volcanoes or the tree is planted too deeply. Sometimes I can't see anything, but it's always a good idea to check. So this is what he sent. So obviously there's an issue here. The tree is definitely planted too deeply. The bark flare is not visible. If this were planted here originally, you would see a big flare out here. So something happened here, and I asked what was going on. They recently moved into the house, and this was the landscape that was there. So it looks like the people who sold them the house had actually done some recent landscaping and put this around because it kind of looked cute. But they filled it in with soil and mulch, and now this tree is planted too deeply. Some dangers that can come from this: the tree will start to die off. There will be bark deterioration. You can end up with cankers and deep cracking. You also, with that increased moisture that's there, it's perfect for a lot of insects. Other animals can get in there. It's really a bad situation for the tree. It usually can take a few seasons for a tree or shrub to die from this. So often people may not associate that that's what caused the decline of the tree. But even with this, I talked to my colleagues to figure out, to ask their input. And we also heard from Hank Stelzer, who's our forestry specialist. And he said that while they build up the soil around the immediate area around the trunk and about 1/4 of the tree's root system to the right in the image, and I'll show you another picture over here because it's more of the root system is covered. He said it's not enough to cause a wholesale decline of the tree. There's a direct vertical relationship between the tree's roots and canopy, meaning any disturbance of the root system will be reflected in canopy decline directly above that disturbance. So looking back out here, you can see that probably about 1/4 of the tree's roots have been disturbed by this landscaping. Looking farther out, there could be other landscaping issues. I don't know if this is actually a new garden area that's been put in, but it's possible. And also there's another terrace here, so I don't know how that could affect it. So those are all things that are being considered when what's going on here. So obviously it's planted too deeply. There's been a root system disturbance, but it's also been a very dry year. I asked them if they had been watering. They said that this tree has not been watered. So this tree is definitely experiencing drought stress. Additionally, in talking to my colleagues, I learned that limbs are falling from other walnut trees in other places in the state. So it's believed that it could be a heavy nut load that's creating extra stress on these trees. The trees just may not be strong enough to hold the limbs, so they break. Additionally, being buried too deeply and the drought stress would contribute in a very large way to this problem. So what do they need to do? Right plant, right place, that definitely applies here. You would want to, if you are going to do a landscape, if you're going to change the hardscape, you might actually need to change the plants. Adding soil and mulch around a tree to fit a landscaping design is not a good way to go. So for this tree, I would recommend carefully removing the soil and mulch, but the damage may already be done. So I definitely recommend bringing in an arborist to evaluate the tree to see if it can be saved. An arborist could also look at the canopy and remove any broken or diseased or branches that are just not in good shape. Just for general care for trees, again, we've said it many times this season with this drought, it's really important to water your trees. If we didn't get enough rain, an inch of rain in a week, then you need to be watering your trees. And when it's been so dry, we even were recommended to do about 2 inches per week. So that's what I recommended for this tree, and I hope that helps if you have any tree issues.
All right. Thanks, Tamara. Thanks so much. Really, really great comprehensive information there. So we did have a question come in this week about a butterfly bush. Was set out last spring, looked great last year. This year, the blooms were few and small. Many of the leaves are brown and the petioles are dead. Looks like might be a Miss Molly variety. It started showing discoloration in June, and it's gone downhill ever since. So, Tamara, were you going to touch on that, or Kathy?
I think that someone else may have been covering it, but I do have some tips because I do actually have a butterfly bush in my yard, and I know that I had a similar situation in that the first year it looked amazing, like way better than I thought that it could, but the second year it struggled, and by the third and fourth year it looks fantastic. But some thoughts that I had with it that second year. After that first year, it's in that perfect soil that the nursery sent. And the second year, it's really adjusting to the native soil that it's in. And so it can take a while for the roots to expand and to adapt and to be able to handle the new environment that it's in. Digging a little bit deeper, I did learn that butterfly bushes are very particular about the soil that they're in. It has to be well drained and you have to water appropriately. Otherwise, you can end up with root rot or they just will not thrive. So my plant, fortunately, is in an area that it does have excellent drainage. I do make sure that I water it properly throughout the season and even a little bit in the winter when it's really dry. If it's been super dry, I will actually get a little bit of water so that it's not drying out, but it's also not sitting in cold, wet soil, which will absolutely kill off a butterfly bush. And
Awesome.
yeah, I can't remember who else was going to talk about it, but they may have more information.
All right. Kathy, did you have anything to add or share about that?
No, I was waiting for pictures to come in to see if that would help us to answer that, and we didn't get those. So maybe we'll have some before the next time we meet.
All right. Thanks, Kathy. We've heard some reports about some issues with herbicide use around trees. And so I guess Kathy or Jennifer, were you going to touch on that topic today?
Is Jennifer on? I don't believe she is.
Yes, I was finally able to get
hi,
on.
Jennifer. Yes.
I still feel like I may be having some issues though. So if you lose me or the screen does something weird, just know that I think I'm still having issues. I'm going to hit share screen right now and we'll see what happens.
Okay, great.
Okay. Can you see this, Kathy?
Yep.
Yes.
Or Justin? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about the careful use of herbicides around trees. This is an issue. Sometimes we get questions. And people ask, can I spray herbicides like Roundup around my trees to get rid of grass or to get rid of weeds? Or another common problem is they have suckers and they want to cut the suckers and then they want to use something like Tordon. So here are some photos of trees that have produced suckers. And as gardeners and homeowners, we do like to keep the trees neat and tidy underneath. And so we want to get out there and we do want to cut those. But why do these trees sucker? Well, there's really two reasons why a tree might grow suckers. And one is because it is under stress. And the other is because the graft has failed if it's a grafted tree. The suckers are a tree's attempt to grow more branches, often in response to some kind of injury. So it may be under stress because it has been hit by a weed eater or a lawnmower, and that's put the tree under stress. Or there could be some other reason why the tree is going under stress. If the roots have been damaged, suckers may grow from the base of the trunk. And then sometimes healthy trees have no signs of stress and they still sucker. So I have a crabapple tree. And it has really no signs of stress, but I get suckers under my crabapple tree. And that is fairly common for crabapples to do that. You do want to remove the suckers from the tree. So I have to remove the suckers from my tree usually twice a year. You may need to do it even 3 times a year. Depends on how fast the suckers grow. But do not use herbicides. This is something that often gardeners want to do. They want to, grab the Roundup or the Tordon, and after they cut the suckers, they want to put a herbicide on. And I get questions, just throughout the year, I get questions, is it okay to put a herbicide on the suckers? And the answer is no, do not do that. Never do that, because the herbicides will kill the tree. The suckers are attached to the root system of the tree. And if you put herbicide like Tordon or Roundup on the cut where you made the cuts, it's going to be taken in by the tree. And then you're going to see signs of damage. You're going to see dying leaves, and, eventually the tree may die, and it could die fairly quickly in a few weeks. It all depends on how much you put on and what you use. Tordon's going to work pretty quickly. So you'll see symptoms of Tordon pretty quick. So we do not recommend any herbicides used around trees to treat suckers or grass. So we don't want you using, Roundup directly around the tree. And I have seen this happen. I was in Macon one time at a home garden, and a small tree was dying. It had gnarled, curled leaves, and the homeowner did say she had used Roundup underneath it to control the grass. So you do not want to use Roundup to control grass around your young trees. So instead, you should pull out the grass, pull out the grass and the weeds under the tree as best as you can. You could put down a layer of cardboard or newspaper, since those are organic materials and they will break down. And then you could cover that with mulch. And a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch around, especially newly planted trees, is recommended. And we recommend that you make a donut around your tree, not a volcano, as shown in the photos here. So never pile mulch up against the trunk. You want to make it flattened and more like a donut. And then sometimes it is okay, actually most of the time, it is okay to leave grass around mature trees. Here at the Adair County Extension Office, we have large mature trees, and we have grass growing right up to the tree. And we just mow the lawn, and the trees are doing fine. So it is okay to have grass around a large mature tree. But starting out with a newly planted tree, you're probably going to want to keep the grass away, because that will take water and nutrients away from your newly planted tree. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Really good information there, and definitely would be a bummer to hurt a large established tree like that. So that's really good information to take home. So the next topic we're going to talk about is fall vegetable hardiness and the frost freeze probability guide. So let me get this pulled up here. All right. So when we're thinking, coming into these next couple weeks here, we need to think about, what the temperatures are doing, how that might affect our different plants in the garden. And I'm going to specifically talk a little bit about some of our vegetable crops. So, when we're thinking about frost versus freezes, what does that really mean? A frost event occurs when air temperatures at ground level dip to 32 degrees or lower. And so frost is going to be this thin formation of ice crystals on the surface of plants. And there may or may not be freezing within the plant tissue, depending on the weather conditions, the duration of the temperatures and whatnot. So a freeze event, as opposed to a frost, is that you do have this ice forming between the cells and within the cells of the plant tissue. So when this happens, we all know that water expands when it freezes. So this can burst the cell walls of the plant tissue and kill the plant, depending on, whether it has any freeze hardiness to it or not. Some plants do have more space between their cells, and there's varying amounts of survival depending on the duration of the cold weather and how much internal ice is formed within some of these different plants. So in general, when we're talking about vegetable crops, they're often broken up into these different categories: hard frost hardy, light frost hardy, and light frost susceptible. So our hard frost hardy plants can tolerate temperatures below 28 degrees. A lot of these are going to be in our brassica or cole crop family. We have some spinach in there as well. Some of the varieties of kale are extremely hardy and can even overwinter and grow into the next season. Kale is a biennial crop. In the second year, it'll produce foliage, but then it'll set flowers and complete its life cycle. Next, we have the light frost hardy crops. And so these can tolerate temperatures down to 28 degrees. And, you know, looking at different university publications, some of these within the light frost and hard frost hardy are switched around depending on which university you're looking at. But these are just some general guidelines. So things like our beets, broccoli, cabbage, carrots, and some of these other plants listed here can tolerate that temperature range. Now, our light frost susceptible plants, that's a pretty cut and dry issue, you know, and a lot of these plants in this category have been domesticated from, you know, tropical climates. So things like cucumbers, tomatoes, a lot of our different flowering crops, they are very frost susceptible. So we want to get those out of the garden before that first frost event. And the good thing is, you know, some of these crops are able to ripen after harvest. So we can still get some fruit, some good eating fruit that's after this first frost. So with our root vegetables, oftentimes that foliage is damaged, but you know, things like carrots, for instance, will still be good to eat and still be in good shape. And some of these root vegetables actually get sweeter as the temperatures cool. And so as those soil temperatures drop down, you know, the sugar content of these different vegetables increases. So one good tool that we have to kind of understand frost and freeze in the state of Missouri, thanks to our state climatologist, Pat Guinan, is this frost freeze probability guides. And so this is based off data from 103 different weather stations in the state of Missouri, and it's based off of long-term data over a 30-year period. And so it's going to provide median last spring, first fall frost and freeze dates, and it provides this information for specific weather stations, as well as builds out these contour maps that helps us understand the different temperature gradients across the state. So if we look at some of these maps, the one on the left is medium temperatures of the first fall temperature below 36 degrees. The one on the right is below, equal to or below 32 degrees. But you'll notice over in the St. Louis metro area, there's definitely a heat island effect. We can see in the southeast corner of the state, that makes a lot of sense that, you know, there's that some of these first fall temperatures are pushed further out. But we definitely have a heat island effect in the St. Louis metro area. And you can see, you know, maybe out in western St. Charles County, Warren County, that first temperature equal to or below 32 is around October 23rd. And then all the way into St. Louis City, it's more like November 1st. And so for some of our more hardy vegetables, we do have median dates for fall temperatures equal to or below 28 and 24 degrees as well. We do have some options though for frost protection. You've probably heard us talk about floating row covers before, and these are really nice. They're a lightweight polyspun fabric. It used to be you had to buy these in pretty big sizes, but now a lot of garden centers and online garden supply companies sell them in sizes that are more convenient for the home gardener. And they're sold in different weights. So the one on the top, 0.55 ounces per square yard, that gives you just a little bit of frost protection. And those are actually often used throughout the season as insect exclusion covers. As you go down the line here and increasing weight, for instance, a 2-ounce row cover is going to give you about 10 degrees protection there. The important thing to know about these is you do need to secure them and secure them well. Otherwise, they'll blow up in heavy winds and could end up in your trees or your neighbor's trees as well. There's also options with cold frames. You know, these can be put together, constructed from a variety of different materials. You're generally going to have a warmer thermal mass in the soil in these types of cold frames, so they're going to offer additional frost and freeze protection over the floating row covers. You do want to make sure on a hot sunny day, even in the fall, we want to ventilate these to get some of that excessive heat out of there, because you could end up cooking some of your plants. And there's plenty of different types of ways that you can make these, different plans online that you can find to make one of these for yourself. But with season extension, there are a couple things we want to think about. Non-flying insects can still get under these row covers, so you do still want to monitor for insect damage. They also make a nice, cozy, warm home for rodents. So this happened to me a number of different times, but you can find mice and different rodents that are just, you know, tucked away and staying warm under those row covers as well. So you might need to manage those rodents. Get these things out of the garden or out of the field when the harvest is over. And most of the time, you know, you can go ahead and reuse these materials the next season. All right, so that is all I have on that. And it looks like next up, and kind of leading into this topic nicely, Kathy Meacham is going to talk to us about our houseplants and fall concerns with our houseplants.
Okay, and then real quickly, Justin, we have a question. Can you recommend a site to order hoops for 4-foot wide beds? It seems like many of the hoops I've ordered in the past are for either narrow beds or shorter plants.
So I'm not exactly sure where you can order them, to be honest with you. I used a hoop bender with electrical metal conduit, and so I should be able to drop something in the chat box there, but I was making them with electrical metal conduit and a bender that actually allowed you to bend those up. So let me see if I can find a link for one of those.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. So kind of unexpectedly, although it is getting close to October, we should know that the temperatures are going to drop. And Jennifer said earlier that in the northeast region where she is, there was a light frost. It did not get, I didn't have a frost. I'm in the northwest region, but the temperatures are getting down to those where it is time and past time to get our get the outside plants in for the winter. So let me all right, so when to move them inside. With warning, you should move them in ideally before temperatures get below 50 degrees. Also, ideally, before you turn your heat on, it would be best to get your plants in so they can acclimate to the house before, you know, the heat is on. You can, if there's time, move them to a more protected area outside before you move them inside. And then, of course, before the threat of frost. Jennifer said that there was no frost warning for her last night, so it can happen. Before you move your plants in, you want to check them for pests, and so check the plants under the underside of the leaves, also pots and saucers. A strong spray of water can help remove any pests on the leaves and, you know, on the pots. You can also soak the root ball in lukewarm water for about 15 minutes to get any pests out, and they'll kind of rise to the top. Also, if you've got any plants that are showing signs of any problems you're concerned about, insects or possible disease, you might want to quarantine those before you bring them in the house near other plants. You want to check the overall health of your plant, cut out any dead leaves or branches. We don't want to trim more than a third of the plant, however. So some of these larger plants, I've got some to trim back, but I want to take it easy on them. I don't want to cut them in half. That's just too much of a shock for them.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes.
We're not seeing your slides advancing. If you're advancing them.
I am advancing them. I wonder what's going on. Let me try some. Let's see.
So it's in like
Is it-
duplicate. It's in, we're seeing the
Oh,
presenter
you're
view.
seeing the other, so I'm not sure how to just,
Yeah, so you should be able to swap it if it'll let you.
huh. You know, I think I'm just gonna start it over and see if, well, I'm not sure how to, yeah.
Well,
I'm gonna
that's okay. I mean, we can still see it if you want to
keep going.
keep moving.
Okay. Also, this time of year, I'm kind of selective. I'm not going to bring every house plant in or every plant I have in, but I might take some cuttings. So on that first picture is a white begonia. And so I might take some cuttings of that. I've also got some impatiens, geraniums. So I'd take cuttings and stick them in water and then start out with smaller plants in the house rather than these larger ones. I'm sorry that I didn't have this displayed correctly. When you do move them in, try to get the best light you can for them. You can clean your windows if you're so inclined, and that will help. Sometimes, if you can, supplemental light is needed, and you want to be very careful for the plants to be around vents or near drafty windows or near doors. That can be hard on the plants to get that gush of wind every day or every time you go in and out the door. If you can, ideally, the temperature's 60 to 70 degrees, depends on the plant. And remember that in the winter, plants need less water. And the number one reason for plants dying inside is overwatering. And I've got a good publication or a good article from Dr. Trinkline that goes more into this indoor care that we'll put in the chat. You can put some plants in an unheated garage. And if you've got really good light, you can put the hibiscus and mandevilla inside, and it may continue to bloom and thrive. But you can try putting them in an unheated garage as well. You can also try lantana, geraniums, begonias, and rosemary and lavender are some herbs that you can put in the garage as well. You need to try to maintain the temperature between 45 and 50. You allow the tropicals to go dormant, and you keep the soil slightly moist, not too wet. They'll start getting a mold on them. And then your herbs can stay outside until the temperatures get really close to freezing, and then bring them in. And I believe that is it.
All right. Thanks so much, Kathy. I was kind of curious, one of our horticulturists was reporting some frost on some leaves up in northern Missouri. And so I was wondering, how could that happen when the weather stations seem to be showing a little bit higher temperatures? But I was doing some reading, and it looked like the National Weather Service, their temperature sensors are actually around 5 or 6 feet off the ground. The thing about cold air is it's dense, and it drops to the lowest point. So, sometimes you might have an area in the yard or garden that's, down at the bottom of a hill where that cold air can settle and might actually be a little bit lower than what the temperature sensors might be reporting. But moving on here, it looks like next up we have some information on planting spring bulbs and trees. And Jennifer, I believe you were going to touch on that.
Yes, I'm going to talk about planting spring bulb flowers and then just touch briefly on planting trees. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about spring bulb flowers because just a few weeks ago, our horticulture specialist, Donna Oftenberg, went into a lot of detail about the spring bulb flowers and the different kinds and just various things you need to know. And it was made into a YouTube video, and that is available to watch. So I'm just going to briefly talk about planting the spring bulb flowers. So you want to select a sunny location. It needs to be a sunny location that gets about 6 hours of sunlight a day. for them to flower well. And the area needs to be well drained. Bulb flowers will not do well in a wet area. They will rot, and then you may wonder why they didn't come up or why they didn't flower well. So make sure that you have a good location when planting any kind of bulb flower. And then you want to prepare the soil. You want to make sure that you have a loose soil bed, not a hard compacted area. So work that soil. You can add a fertilizer or bulb booster at this time. I have planted bulbs many times in the fall and never used a fertilizer or bulb booster. So you don't have to, but there are people that like to use bulb boosters, and the garden centers and nurseries sell bulb booster. So it is okay to use that. And it's really not that expensive of a product. So you should be able to find that at your local garden center if you want to use that. Just know you don't have to. The next thing you want to do is follow the label directions on the package of bulbs, and make sure that you plant the bulbs at the depth that is stated on the label. Planting too deep can cause the bulbs not to flower, or planting too shallow can cause heaving during the winter. So the smaller the bulb, the more shallow it's going to be planted, and the bigger the bulb, the deeper it's going to be planted. And again, those planting depths will be on the label. So read the label. You can start planting now, and it is recommended to plant through November, even early November. But you want to do it before the ground freezes. And every year I get a question from someone asking if they can plant, let's say, the first week of December or the second week of December, because they forgot their bulbs. They put them in a cabinet in the garage and they forgot they were there. And then they found them and realized, oh, I need to plant these. And that happens. That happens to all of us at times. And the answer is yes, you can plant them in December. If you forgot to plant them earlier, you can plant them up until the ground freezes. It's just that now through October is recommended because that gives them time to establish the root system and just get going before the ground freezes and winter sets in. When you're planting them, make sure you put the pointed end up, and on the wider end, you will often see the roots. You'll see some roots. So that's an indication, that the roots need to be down on the soil, in contact with the soil, and the pointed end goes up. You do want to plant your bulb flowers in groups. That will give you a more showy display of color in the springtime. I like to do that. I'll plant anywhere from 4 to 8 bulbs in a group. And then I get, masses of color here and there versus, a red tulip here and a red tulip there and a yellow one here. So I don't really like that here and there, pattern. I really do like the mass planting of any spring bulb flower. And then the bulb beds can be mulched for winter protection. And you can use pine branches. If you have a pine tree, you can lay that over the beds. You can use mulch. You can use, bagged mulch. That's fine. Leaves probably aren't the best. We don't really recommend whole leaves, as whole leaves get wet, they get matted down. So they don't always provide the best protection because of that region. They can smother plants. But, if you're going to choose one, I'd recommend bagged mulch, pine branches, something that's looser. Here's a planting chart. And just a few weeks ago when Donna did her presentation, she used this same planting chart. So you may have already seen this. This chart shows you early spring bloomers and then mid-spring and late spring. And it shows you the depth at which those bulbs should be planted. So the smaller the bulb, the more shallow it will be planted. And you can see with those early spring bloomers, they tend to have the smaller bulbs, and you're going to plant them at about 4 inches or maybe 4 to 6 inches, whatever that label tells you. And then you can see as we get into the medium to bigger bulbs, they're going to be planted at a deeper depth, typically 6 to 8 inches, maybe a little deeper. Just plant them at whatever the label tells you to do. And then on the right side, the numbers going up show you the height at which those plants can get. These are my own spring flowering bulbs, and I love irises. Actually, I like all spring flowers. And I really like my root beer colored irises here, and they look really pretty when planted in a mass. So any iris, or daffodils, tulips, grape hyacinth, they're all pretty planted in a mass. And so those daffodils are some that I have in an island bed. And in my island bed, I have a good variety. I have the grape hyacinth. As you can see, I have groups of daffodils. I have some groups of tulips. And when they're all in bloom, it really does make a showy display of color. And then moving on to planting trees and shrubs. Fall is a good time to plant your trees and shrubs. So right now you can be planting those. Sometimes it is easier to find what you're looking for in the spring because the garden centers and nurseries have a larger variety. It seems like, especially in our rural areas, they have a larger variety in the springtime. But there are some stores and nurseries that will get trees in the fall, just for fall planting. So take a look and see what you can find if you're needing to plant a tree. We have been recommending native trees here in the last several years because they're hardy and adapted to our environment. They're often adapted to our soil, and people just have pretty good luck with native trees versus some exotic tree. And sometimes our trees that are not native here can cause problems. They can be invasive. They may drop, fruits and seed pods that are kind of messy. So look into your native trees if you're wanting to plant a tree this fall. Select an ideal site for the tree. Think right tree, right place, or right plant, right place. And read the planting label. So same with the bulbs, always read that planting label so you know how deep to plant the tree. Plant it at the correct depth. And then place mulch around the tree. And you want to place that mulch in a donut, not a volcano, not piled up against the trunk of the tree. You want to water your newly planted tree or shrub, especially if it is dry. Some years we get plenty of rainfall in the fall, and then other years we have dry fall. So if it's been dry, keep your tree watered. But when you go to water your tree, if it looks wet from the last watering, if it still looks very moist or even kind of muddy, don't keep watering it. You do need it to dry out. Planting too deep and under or over watering a tree are the most common reasons why trees die. Okay, so we don't want to be over watering our newly planted trees, but then underwatering can also have the same effect. If it's dry and you're not watering enough, you can kill it that way also. And that's all I have on planting trees and spring flowering bulb flowers.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We appreciate that. And next up, also a timely topic because people are probably mowing their grass a little bit more here and maybe seeing some of the issues with some of the mammals that are taking residence in our lawn. So Manoj is going to touch on mole control.
All right. Again, excited to be here back. So let's talk about moles today. First of all, before I go too much on the control options, let's be clear that the moles are not necessarily pest. If it is out of place, if it is displeasing to you, if it is causing nuisance on your yard, if the damage is too much and affecting the aesthetic value of a yard, then yes, it is a pest, but not necessarily every moles can be a pest. It is actually a natural aerator. It brings the soft surface soil to the top level and does all the job that the natural aerator brings the good soil to the top, which is very fertile. So keep that in mind from the environmental perspective as well. But the biggest myth I want to touch that is we hear about if you have a moles, then the moles are there because there are grubs in our yard. Yes, moles are carnivores, they feed on grubs, but the approach that we think like if there is moles, then there should be grubs is not necessarily true. Actually, these moles, they feed heavily on earthworms. They do feed on other larvae, beetles of insects and other kinds. But thinking like the grubs control maybe the solutions to control moles is not the right approach. Okay, first of all, when you spray, or when you think of controlling grubs just to control moles and going to the insecticides route, you are spraying insecticides without knowing how much grub population you have in your yard. You are not following the guidelines to apply the judicious amount of insecticides. What we say is when you have a grubs of more than 5 grubs, I'm talking about Japanese beetles grubs here. If you have more than 5 grubs per 1 square feet, then that's the above the economic thresholds, and that's warrant the insecticides. But if you have less than that, then that does not warrant insecticides, because it can create imbalance in your pest populations, in your living organisms, because insecticides will kill a lot of other beneficial living organisms in your soil. So if someone is suggesting you to use insecticide just to take care of moles, then that's a wrong approach. But let's talk about moles here. Again, depending on your personal test and personal preference, how much is tolerable to you, how much damage is there from the moles. Some of you might be just okay, some of you might need some control options. So let's go into identifying how to identify moles and the level of damage they do and the control options here. So here you can see the mounds of dirt that moles have pushed up from the below surface to the top of a yard. So the particular distinguishing feature of these type of damage is that they bring this dirt in a conical mounds or in a volcano shape. There's a hill on the top, and there's no particular holes. In other kinds of rodents, like your pocket gophers or voles, there's a holes on your yard or next to that mounds. But there's no particular holes. It's just a mound of dirt in a volcano shape. Okay, and that's a distinctive from these moles. And again, let's go back to my picture here. The moles, again, these are they have a pointed snout, and the feet are webbed, which is not very common in other kinds of rodents and mice. Okay, they are active throughout the year, although they are more active in spring and fall, but they can feed throughout the year. You may not have noticed the moles in moles in a yard, but you always encounter the damage because they are always underground and they rarely come above ground. But there are some options that you can always look at. Different options you have available in the market, like repellents, baits, and trapping. And if you use them very judicially and appropriately, you can get good control of that. And first thing is always identifying the kind of pest you have, and if you can positively confirm that it's a mole, and from the level of, from the nature of the damage they are doing, if you can confirm it's a mole, then there are some options. But what is the first thing you need to do before you look for those options is, these moles, they burrow tunnels all over the place in different directions. And the key here is to identify the active runway. What they do is they dig a tunnel and then they abandon that after a few days. Okay, so the key here is to identifying basically your interested highway. Okay, there's one main route, that's a highway, and there's other runways which are like exploratory runways. They may use that occasionally, but not very often. So if you can identify the active runways that they have been using continuously, then all those control measures, whether you are using repellents, baits, traps, then they can be only effective once you know which tunnel the moles are identifying. So how do you do that? So you can use as simple as a broomstick there and go ahead and mark these different spots on your runways or tunnels and push the dirt beneath. Once you push the dirt, next day or so, you come back and see which spots have been repaired. The roof of that tunnel will be repaired by the moles if they are using that route. So that's how you know which route are they using most actively. And once you know that the route, then you can use different options. First, people tend to use is repellents. They are basically derived from castor oil, but there is not enough studies that are suggesting that these repellents will be effective in controlling or managing moles. So I will stay away from those. They tend to work maybe a few days, but after a while, moles, I think they tend to get adapted to that bad odor and does not work. Okay. And another class of management options is poison baits. There are different kinds in market. Some of them are formulated with grains. And again, I say these moles are carnivores. They do not feed on grass or grains. So they are looking for insects. So the baits that are formulated from grains, those will not work because the moles do not like to eat those. There are some other baits that are formulated from earthworm and grubs castings, and those will work because they like those grubs and worms. And some of them are just as effective as just a single worm can kill one mole if they consume that. But again, the key here is identifying the active route and placing that bait correctly in that channel. Okay, when you know this is the route that mole is using, then you make a little space there under the below the turf canopy, and drop that bait, and then loosely cover that so that when mole is using that runway, it can find that bait and not completely cover that with the soil or tamp it down. Okay, just loosely cover that. And again, another issue with this thing is, of course, it's toxic to pets and humans, so you have to be careful with that. Another option is traps. And traps, as dreadful as may sound, but this is the most effective and economical and environmental friendly options. It, however, requires a lot of hit and trial. It needs mastering. You cannot get success in first few instances, but eventually, once you know which is the active route, and once you get used to with this, how to effectively use these traps, then you can get pretty much successful in catching moles with these traps. And where the moles are a perennial problem, and this can be a most economical means, believe it or not. Okay. With that, I will finish my talk here today, and then get it back to Justin.
All right. Thanks so much, Manoj. Appreciate all that great information there. So I know we share a lot of great information in the chat box, and I want to let everybody know that you can go ahead and save all that information. If you just hover down here at the bottom over these three dots, you can save all that chat information into a file and come back to it whenever you want to take a look at it. I also want to let you know that we do live stream on YouTube if you'd like to view it that way. And we also record every garden hour and post it on our YouTube channel. And then we take weekly snippets when we have highlights for that week, and go ahead and create those into shortened segments and put them up there on our YouTube channel. I want to let folks know that we will be going to a monthly schedule. So this week is the last week of our weekly garden hour schedule for the year. Our next garden hour will be on October 19th, and then we'll be running the third Wednesdays from October until March. So we do definitely want you to keep joining us, keep sending your pictures in. We definitely appreciate you all being here and spending your time with us over the hour here. I do want to let folks know that, you know, we really enjoy having everyone here, and one thing we ask in return is to get your feedback. So next garden hour, we'll be sharing a link to an evaluation and survey, and everybody will get an email for that brief survey as well. We definitely appreciate your feedback. It allows us to improve our programming and allows us to demonstrate our impact across Missouri. So between now and then, if you have any questions, definitely submit them. Keep those questions rolling in. You can submit them at the website here, ipm.missouri.edu/townhalls. And you'll pop up a menu like this. You can put in your information, your county, and your name. Include, you know, as detailed of a question as you can, and then also go ahead and attach any pictures to that as well, because the pictures always worth a lot for us and can really help us identify some of the issues that are going on there. So once again, we are statewide with our horticulture coverage. And so if you ever need any assistance, feel free to reach out to the horticulturist in your county or in your neighboring county if your county happens to be open. I'll leave this slide up for just a second, and we're always really, really grateful to get your questions and to help Missourians statewide. So with that, we will go ahead and sign off, and thank you so much for everyone joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you in a couple weeks here.